Hello, Climate Tech Connect members. Welcome to today's webcast, Lessons Learned from 4 Climate Tech Entrepreneurs. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a Climate Tech Connect member. I'm Jake Mitchell. I'm the Senior Manager of Startup Programs with Trellis Group, formerly known as GreenBiz, and the captain of this Climate Tech Connect ship. And we have an awesome stacked panel for you today. I'm super excited to jump in. But before we get into it, as always, I'd like to cover some housekeeping items. So for those of you who might be brand new or might not know of Climate Tech Connect yet, Climate Tech Connect is Trellis Group's free to join digital innovation community. And we deliver monthly content and connections for climate innovators like yourself, including startups, investors, corporate partners, and more. For the remainder of this year, we'll bring you one webcast per month featuring industry expert panels discussing topics such as corporate startup partnerships or state of various climate tech sectors. We also have interactive sessions such as reverse pitches with investors and corporate VCs. We also have startup demo days, so stay tuned for those coming up in the platform. And just by being a Climate Tech Connect member, you're eligible to participate in these webcasts as either an attendee or a speaker. So with that said, make sure to fill out your profile in Climate Tech Connect if you haven't already. It'll help us identify you as a potential speaker and also other matchmaking opportunities for investors, corporates, and startups. The profile shouldn't take you more than 2 minutes to complete, so please go ahead and do that. Moving on, this webcast platform has a number of features I'd like to point out. So you'll see on the left side of your screen a few different tabs, including the Live tab and the People tab. So in the Live tab, you can see the live stream of today's webcast, the attendee chat window, and the Q&A window. Feel free to chat with other attendees at any time. Drop a question in the chat, and you should let us know if you have any technical issues in the window. At the end of today's webcast, we'll have about 10 minutes to share your questions for the speakers, so you can drop in a question at any time. To see who else is streaming and watching this webcast with you, click on the People tab. And then finally, note that this webcast is being recorded, and the recording will be shared with all registrants in the next 24 hours. So without further ado, let's get into it. So today we have 4 truly impressive growth stage climate tech entrepreneurs to share their lessons learned along their journeys and to hopefully help you along your journey. I'll introduce them all in a minute, but the way the webcast will go today is after the intros, I will hand the mic off to Chris Wedding, who will be moderating the session for about 10 minutes. He'll share his 9 lessons learned from working with climate tech CEOs and being a founder himself, and then facilitate a conversation with our 3 growth stage entrepreneurs today, Amit, Gupta, Bryan, Hassin, and Kameale Terry. So a little bit more on each of these amazing folks, amazing speakers today. Chris Wedding will be moderating this again, and Chris is the founder of Entrepreneurs for Impact, where he leads climate CEO peer groups and executive coaching. He's also the co-founder of TerraSet, a carbon removal company. He's a senior advisor at Javelin Capital, which is investment banking, a Duke and UNC professor, board member and advisor for climate tech startups, and an ex-private equity investor and investment banker. So Chris, thank you for being with us. Next up, we have Bryan Hassin. Bryan is the CEO of DexMat, leading the scale-up of carbon negative materials to render steel, aluminum, and copper obsolete. Prior to DexMat, Bryan was the co-founder and CEO of Third Derivative, and previously he's led multiple climate tech ventures to over $100 million exits. He's also the board director of Pyrophyte, GiveWatts, and LabStart. Next up, we have Kameale Terry. Kameale is the CEO of ChargerHelp, and Kameale is a South Central Los Angeles native with deep commitment to environmental sustainability and community engagement. She has over a decade of experience in clean tech, and she co-founded ChargerHelp to provide reliable maintenance and repair services for electric vehicle charging stations. Previously, Kameale's held leadership roles at EV Connect and serves as an advisor and co-creator of industry events in the clean tech sector. And last but not least, we have Amit Gupta. Amit is the CEO of Aeroseal. And Amit's a self-proclaimed dreamer, and he's an entrepreneur driven to make the world a better place through energy efficiency technologies. Aeroseal dreams that every house and building could be a passive home or net zero building with Aeroseal and Aero barrier technology at no cost penalty. And Aeroseal was founded in 2010. So I hope you're excited as I am for this conversation, and I will pass the mic over to you, Chris.
Great, thanks, Jake. Yes, I'm as excited as you are. All right, I'm going to walk through 9 lessons learned from working with great CEOs like the 3 on the call here, and lots of others. So they're not a lot of text, very short, very sweet. Hopefully, the first one here: reflect, don't react, or maybe be more proactive versus reactive is a goal. This quote from Viktor Frankl, the author of Man's Search for Meaning, which hopefully many of you have read. A frequently recommended book among everybody, but among entrepreneurs as well. Between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space is our power to choose a response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom. There are multiple members of EFI's Climate Tech CEO peer group who say this is maybe the most important takeaway they've had over years of being in the program. They have this on a sticky note on their computer. Again, choosing how we react versus being reactive to the many stimuli, often not super happy, that founders deal with. Number 2, being curious versus judgmental, a quote that we'd love to attribute to Walt Whitman, apparently incorrectly. Anyway, look, I don't watch much TV. However, I've watched the Ted Lasso series 3 times. Once with my wife, once with my parents, once with one of our kids. Huge fan. This kind of mindset shift has also gone over well with our EFI CEOs. And the comments are that being judgmental maybe is all of our bias, but it leads to closing off possibilities. It often implies a hierarchy that I, maybe the boss, know more than you, the person reporting to me, versus being curious, right? It's more teamwork, more trust, more open to possibilities that you, the founder, may not have thought of. Number 3, maybe this is old news by now, but selling benefits versus features. And here from Zig Ziglar, a different version of that. We buy based on emotion and then perhaps justify through logic. Benefits, things like reducing cost, reducing risk, boosting confidence, boosting status, and so forth, versus features which describe nitty-gritty details we all fall in love with around chemistry or engineering or tech and so forth. We care, they matter, but they're the means, not the ends for our customers. Number 4, great book I'd recommend you pick up. Super simple concept. As we entrepreneurs struggle with how to fix this, solve that, etc., the better question may be, who should fix this? Who should solve that versus us doing it all? Even though we're pretty good, that's why we built a company, while we're building companies. 3 related quotes there on the left. I'll pick on just 2 of those. I'll start from the bottom, which is at the same time super obvious and also delightfully insightful. Have you ever noticed that the bottleneck is at the top of the bottle, right? So if you're the founder, the CEO, you are often the bottleneck. This is a way, asking who, not how, to get out of the way. And the top one, hire 1 to hire 10, versus us figuring out how do I go find the 10 best people for this new division, function, etc. Instead, I can hire a higher level a director, let's say, VP kind of title perhaps, and then they go more appropriately, more efficiently, more effectively hire those 10 people. Number 5, keeping the first things first. So this is a book by Stephen Covey, leadership expert, among other things. And this just implies, look, as founders, we're pulled in 1,000 directions. It's easy to forget the most important things. That is to say, outside of our business, oftentimes. And those could include the the first things first could include getting, I know it sounds crazy, 8 hours of sleep at night, right? Or taking time before your crazy day starts to just hit the gym. Maybe it's Vipassana, maybe it's other forms of meditation. Or one CEO on our recent podcast said, I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning before her 4 kids, and she reads fiction. And I said, first time ever a CEO said they read fiction at 5 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, that's her first thing in the morning before it gets crazy. Number 6, focus on inputs, not outputs. Clearly, we all care about the outputs. Certainly, if we have investors, they care a lot about the outputs. But we, on these missions, we care about the customers we sign, the tons of GHGs we pull out of the atmosphere and so forth. But maybe focusing on inputs is the better way to get to the outputs we care about. 2 books you may want to pick up or listen at 1.6x speed on Audible. Atomic Habits, which hopefully you've all read. Most of the world has read this. Anyway, one quote from James Clear on the left: we don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. So how good are your systems? Often not people dependent, but systems dependent. The book, which is related, The Score Takes Care of Itself, a different version, if you're a football fan perhaps, a different version of focusing on the inputs to get the score, the wins that you're after. All right, 3 more. 3 more than fireside chat. Be candid, but be compassionate. So this AI generated cartoon here, your baby's ugly, right? We don't really want to say your baby's ugly. What I really mean is whether it's 360 feedback, whether it's company offsites, we can't make the progress as a company or as people until we're super honest about what the situation is. Or maybe that's our limitations, or maybe it's our company's, look, product market fit is not there despite what we want to believe is true. Brutal honesty, but in the best interest of, in this case, your employees, your investors, etc. Number 8, being the coach versus the player. As entrepreneurs, we're all great players, which is why we were able to build these companies, but that's really not the goal. The goal is to elevate, to go a little meta, to be the coach versus the player, hence the kind of trees versus the forest, to work on the business versus in the business, as they say, or as is said super well in this book, E-Myth Revisited, a classic in entrepreneurship, super quick read, which provides an example of this in a kind of a parable story format. It's harder to do earlier in your company, of course, and essential that you do as you get some scale. Okay, last one. We all have to keep sharpening the axe, right? So the book here on the left says it well. What got you here won't get you there where you want to go. We have to keep leveling up. So three quotes to emphasize that. The bottom 2 a little severe, but I think you get the idea. So whether that's reading X books per year, getting mentors, taking courses, joining, wink wink, a CEO peer group, whether it's ours, ... or lots of generalist CEO peer groups out there, Vistage, YPO, EO, and lots of others. All right, that was 9, many more, but let's get to our fireside chat. But first, some links, should you choose to dig in deeper to the companies you're going to hear from, Aeroseal, DexMat, and ChargerHelp, or the work we do at EFI. There's links to, of course, our websites, but also reports like Kameale's, which you'll reference their 2024 annual reliability report, or our newsletter or podcast, case studies from Aeroseal, or Bryan's upcoming book, Moonshot Leaders. All right, everyone's interest has peaked. Who are these CEOs? Let's switch to the videos only. I'm going to go to my questions here. Kameale, let's start with you. So talk to us about how you've built a network to navigate both sales and fundraising as a first-time founder.
Well, first and foremost, Chris, thanks for having me. And you'll like my last part of this answer. So for me, I am somebody that believes in authentic relationships, right? And finding folks that are aligned with where you're already going. And so some of the places that I was able to really, build a network is definitely with organizations like the LA Clean Tech Incubator, Elemental. If you're based in Southern California, Grid 110, and then also a very interesting organization called MIT Solve. And through those different incubators and accelerators and programs, when I first started ChargerHelp, we raised about, through pitch competitions and being exposed to things, just a little less than $500,000. And that was about finding folks that believed in us, wanted to support us, and then being able to really understand our story, which gets me to my second point in regards to like figuring out your network. It's that if you have a good story, don't be ashamed of that story, lean into that story and tell it. I think that we're at a very critical point where people are looking for hope. People are looking for things to like latch onto. And as climate founders, it's so important for us to showcase how we can build and grow together and change the environment. So really, crafting your story. If you have a good story, don't be ashamed about how you got to where you got to, and really helping people see the future that you can create through your company. And then my last course is Entrepreneurs for Impact. I think that as I've grown, you like that one, right, Bryan? As I've grown as the CEO and founder, finding folks that have, this is their second or third company that they're built, or maybe they're not a founder and they came in and they're a CEO now, but even hearing how they're thinking about how they're navigating sales acquisitions, or where should I be? What should I be expecting now with my team as I'm growing a team has been so important. So just to recap, incubators and accelerators for first-time founders like Lacey, Elemental, Grid 110, MIT Solve. Not only will you get access to customers, you might actually get access to free funding, which is neat. Second piece is owning your story, telling that story to anybody that will listen. You'd be surprised what people will give you if you got a good story. And then the third piece is absolutely Entrepreneurs for Impact, leaning into, founders and CEOs that this is not their first rodeo, and they can help you navigate some of the landmines that comes with, building a company. How's that for an answer, Chris? You like that? The last one, right?
I love all those points. I like the third the most. Anyway, no, very practical. Thanks, Kameale.
You're welcome.
Let's go to you, Amit. So a little different than most would expect. You bootstrapped your company to a considerable size before you took on tens of millions of dollars of outside investor capital. So maybe talk to us about kind of why those two phases for Aeroseal.
Well, part of it is the timing. When I started the company, it was 2010. And if people remember 2010, it was, I don't know, people didn't know where the bottom is, right? How bad it's going to get, whether it's housing, whether it's, all sorts of financial crises, right? Lots of layoffs. And there were talks of Great Depression, right? It's called Great Recession. So I got term sheets when I started, and it was, I could get the money I want, but they wanted my left arm and my firstborn to give me the money. And I'm like, okay, left arm is okay. Firstborn probably is not. So I said, what's the alternative? Alternative is to just bootstrap. And we literally bootstrapped the company, which is in some ways a lot of good learning, right? You learn the fundamental, you learn how every penny can be stretched, how every dollar can be earned with very little cost of sales. So we kept at it for a considerable time, for almost 10 years, and we built a good business, right? It is at that time we realized we got some new technologies, and we were like, our dream is to become one of the most influential company, as Jake mentioned, in improving the building efficiency and reducing the carbon footprint of the buildings. So, we gave up good to become great. That's where we said, okay, we can't achieve that vision without getting considerable outside help. And it's not just the outside help of money, it is the right network of people, right? As you were mentioning, Chris, in your opening, having that set of people around you who have built bigger things, who have experience building companies which are world impacting, is the key. So that's what we did in 2021. And in the last 3 years, as you mentioned, we've raised a considerable amount of money for scaling.
So what you're saying is the tens of millions of dollars have outside capital. It's pretty nice, but the network's pretty helpful as well. Yeah, it's more than capital. More than capital.
Yes.
Bryan, let's go to you. So this is not your first rodeo with DexMat. You had seen thousands of climate tech startups through your role as CEO of Third Derivative, and you kind of cherry picked at this one. But talk to us about some of the lessons you're bringing from hundreds of millions of dollars of prior exits to grow DexMat.
Yeah, I've had the great privilege of hundreds of millions of dollars of private exits, and I've had some failures and crashes and burns along the way. And often some of the best lessons actually come from those. And I would say, across all of the ventures I've either led or co-founded or played a material role in, it's clear to me that more important than the product, the technology, the finance, the marketing, really it all comes down to people that make the difference between success and failure. The people on the team and your ability to lead them. So I've been part of organizations where we've had the wrong people in the wrong place, and we've made a change, and it's just been transformational. I've been one of those wrong people in the wrong place as well, so I've seen it kind of from both sides. So, I really think the job of a startup CEO and a climate tech startup CEO is to surround yourself with smart, motivated, diverse, values-aligned people and set them up for success. And that's a great privilege, because as a founder, as a CEO, you can really build your dream team. And one thing I do is I maintain a list of the people for whom it would just be a dream to work. People I've worked with in the past and it's gone very well, and I'd love to work with them again, or people I've never had the opportunity to. But it's, one of the takeaways is, over the course of a career, you're gonna have some successes, you're gonna have some failures, and the only thing you're really gonna take from one to the next is the relationships that you build. And so you should be purposeful about it and really work to develop them. So maybe a second and ancillary lesson is that because it is going to be kind of a long career for everyone, I hope, with many adventures. Again, there are going to be ups, there are going to be downs, but you should always be playing the long game. Like, you should be thinking in this moment, not just what makes me successful today, but what are the things that I'm doing today that are going to help set me up for success in the next thing and the next thing. Are there new relationships I'm building? Are there new things I'm learning, new experiences I'm having? Because there will be some failures inevitably if you're in the startup game, but you keep working, you keep learning, you keep building, and you will kind of zig and zag your way towards some success. And so maybe the final point, which is also sort of related, you hear, hey, play the long game. And it reminds me of this quote I often hear, which drives me crazy, which is that, when like a startup isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. And it's like, it's not a marathon either, right? I mean, a marathon is like long, slow, and steady, and that is not a startup, right? You've got to move with sprinter speed, but you got to be able to sustain it for a long time. I say, especially in a field like climate tech, where often the pathways to success might take longer. So I think it's really important for leaders, both at the organizational level and at the personal level, to build kind of discrete sprints into the work that you're doing. Target specific objectives, work really hard to push to achieve them, but build in a priori opportunities for rest and recovery, and and most importantly, reflection and learning in those times, because that's what sets you up for better success in the next sprint. So it's not a sprint, it's not a marathon, it's what I like to call it a sprintathon.
I was waiting for it. I was waiting for it, Bryan. Yeah, I wrote down two things there. One is on the note of thinking long-term and relationships. One of the investors I was coaching recently said, look, at this point, I'm collecting friends, not colleagues. And I was like, all right, I like that reframe. The other is different, but to your last point, one of our EFI CEOs was like, look, we just achieved this huge contract, 3x our biggest contract to date. The team's totally fried, but guess what? We have to do more of those, right? Like this year. How can the team recharge? And another serial CEO said, look, what we did in that case is, for a period of time, this was the summer, we just gave folks Friday off to recover, right? Now, maybe that's not the solution all the time, but we do need these periods to recover for sure. Kameale, let's go back to you. So one reason we get along, Kameale, is I know you have this, I think growth mindset is an understatement. Like, this just super hunger to learn and evolve as a CEO. I think we're frequently talking about books you're digesting and what it means to translate that into leadership to ChargerHelp, bringing in outside speakers to kind of challenge your team on hard conversations and the like. Talk to us about maybe kind of the practicalities of, sorry, easy for me to say, the practicalities of this growth mindset as a CEO to constantly learn and kind of up your game.
Absolutely. No, thanks for that, Chris. Yeah, I mean, I think a truth that I believe, right, that I was taught as a kid from my dad is that there's literally nothing that I cannot achieve. Does not mean that it won't be hard. It does not mean that I won't have to put in the work, but like literally, if I put my mind to something, I'm gonna figure it out. And I think that foundation has really pushed me to then start unpacking, okay, I have a goal of where I need to get to. How do I navigate that space? How can I get there? And, almost 2.5 years into ChargerHelp, we raised about $22 million. I ain't never just had $1 million. So to have $22 million, have these crazy goals that I'm going after. We landed a contract with Tesla. We just hired about 30 people. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going where I want to go, but how are we going to make sure that this is going to be successful? And so and Chris, you probably remember this, when I first started, I used to do a week off, I think once a month, and I would read. And I actually picked this up from Bill Gates. So I believe Bill Gates, at least a month, he goes away into wherever and he reads. I said, well, if Bill Gates can take off time to go read, I sure can take off time to go read. And so in those first couple of months of building ChargerHelp, I was reading, there's a book just called VC. I read everything about how venture capitalism came about. Right. I really delved into really design thinking, because within climate, we're trying to solve very complex things. But in order for it to fit well with the average consumer, it has to be simple. It has to be beautiful. It cannot be what we've been putting out into the ether recently. And so I would just over-index on the information that I would need to now be a good steward of this capital and be able to set myself up for success. One book I do want to point out, I actually learned this, I think somebody from our group, Chris, is The Great CEO Within. If you do not buy any book by The Great CEO Within, because it actually takes all of the books that are out there about building a business. And what I like about it the most is that there's actually templates. So how I run my executive meeting is based off a template from that book. How I track my OKRs monthly is based off a template for that book. Because as I've gotten, more into building a company, I can't take off a week and read anymore. But I can find books that are very, practical. And the last thing that I'll add to that, as you grow your company, it's so important that you continue to really invest in your mind and your body and your spirit, because I feel like the greatest challenge, right, to holding on to that growth mindset will be yourself. And so really figuring out ways to take care of that. And what I do now is that I at least read one page of a book a day. Even if I only got 5 seconds, I say, Kameale, you can read this one page. And so just keeping those things will help you really be successful. But thank you so much for that question, Chris.
Yeah, it's a great answer. Your advice from your dad makes me want to rethink how I'm parenting real quick. It's too late for our oldest. He just started college, but I got time with the younger two. They can do anything if they set their mind to it. Not if, but how. Your reference to reading, there's another book called The Slight Edge, which references kind of what you just said, right? I think their example would be like simple math. If you read 10 pages a day, that's like 3,650 pages, per year. Anyway, it adds up, right? It adds up, but the consistency is really important. I'm also going to switch to Amit with a book reference and also going to another question. But Amit, I believe it's true that in your company, if somebody wants to buy a book, there's no budget for that. You just say, buy it. That's correct?
That is correct. Growth mindset is one of our 6 values as well. And we have top 10 recommended books everybody has to read. And it came from General Mattis in Marines, that every rank you go up, you have to read a set of books. It gives common language. It gives common references for the people to talk about. So that's the power of the books, right? I mean, I feel books are so important to the overall human growth and civilization that without that, we'd be a different place, right? So
For sure.
Yeah, anybody can buy any books without telling anyone. There's no budget for it. And any type of books. So it's not work related or anything else. And the idea is that once people get to that sense of learning, whatever you're learning, you can't stop at learning in one area and don't take that and translate that to learning in other areas, right? It is what you mentioned about if you develop a curious mind, if you start connecting dots, that is a big part of how humans grow, right? And I believe an amazing company cannot be amazing where people in that company are not amazing or becoming amazing, right? So,
yeah, personal growth is related to business growth, for sure. Okay, so that was kind of a half question I gave you. Let me give you a full question that's just for you, handcrafted for Amit Gupta.
okay.
You have these lovely 5 Ds that describe kind of a life/company philosophy, and I like them a lot. So why don't you share those 5 Ds with folks?
Sure, I'll share a little bit of a background before I get to those 5 Ds, right? I mean, entrepreneurship is hard. Entrepreneurship is probably one of the hardest things, as Josh Bernard Shaw said, right? And I'm paraphrasing in some way that most reasonable people just adapt to the world, right? And most unreasonable people insist and persist that the world adapts to them. Hence, all progress in the world depends on unreasonable people, right? So we are fundamentally unreasonable people. So, and part of that unreasonableness is that we are inherently dissatisfied. We believe the world could be different and better, right? How do we take the dissatisfaction and not let that paint a wider dissatisfaction with everything around us because we're trying to make something better? And that is where I got into, where I was just, even though when I reflect back, I feel like I've achieved a lot. This is 5-6 years back, and I'm almost living my dream life. But I just couldn't get over that deep sense of discontentment, dissatisfaction, and I couldn't find a good reason for it, right? That's just like, why should I be so, off center all the time, right? I can't see the sky to be blue. I can't just take a moment and live the life. I'm always trying to, back to Viktor Frankl, I think, I'm always trying to become happy, but the realization that you cannot become happy, you have to be happy, right? That's all came together for me. So I got into, learning more about myself, got into Stoicism, got into Vipassana, and then I wanted to, put it all together. And that's how I came up with these 5 Ds. So with that background, my 5 Ds, summarizing all of that is I'm very, very driven and I'm very, very determined, but I'm detached from the outcome. So both part of that input and goals would take care of itself, right? But I am never desperate and I'm never, ever in despair. So those are my 5 Ds: driven, determined, detached, not desperate, never, ever in despair.
Well, I feel like this has turned into a parenting advice phone call. I'm just kidding. Actually, I'm not. Those are great. A great summation of Vipassana and Stoicism. Thanks for that. Bryan, back to you. So there's a quote that many of us have heard: "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." Yum yum. What makes for a good culture for a climate tech startup, and how do you shape it proactively?
Yeah, and I think the quote really resonates with me. I mean, culture happens at a startup, whether you want it to or not, but you have an opportunity as a leader to shape it and create it proactively. I personally, I really have had a lot of success with instilling what I would call kind of an explorer culture, a culture that's courageous, but also balanced and sustainable, so that we can keep going for the long run, purposeful. We know what we're out there have really set out to do and why, and one that's actually fun. I think explorers who are out there exploring really enjoy it as well. And I think there are a few keys to it. The first is you got to get the right people who are receptive to such a culture kind of onto the team. We've had a lot of success in hiring, optimizing for curiosity and humility as two kind of key traits in team building. Those are people who often, are eager to explore, to try new things, to test new boundaries, and also have the humility to recognize that they don't know all the answers, which is pretty part and parcel of a startup. I think most companies, and maybe most startups as well, tend to hire for a role and then to try to fit people into a culture. And we've just had a lot of experience doing the opposite, kind of hiring for culture and then training for role. Once you've got the right people kind of on the team, you got to create a psychologically safe environment. It's one of these great counter intuitions that for an organization to be courageous, you have to start with safety, but it's very true. One of the best ways I think to create a psychologically safe environment is to measure it, right? I mean, it's classic, what gets measured gets managed, and there are great assessments that you can use. And even just the act of demonstrating to your team that you're assessing their psychological safety, I mean, that sends a huge message to your team about how important that is. And once you've got a baseline, then you can take specific actions to try to kind of improve the overall psychological safety of the team. As a specific example, in multiple ventures now, I've had success implementing failure Fridays, in which we get together all hands at the end of a week and ask for volunteers to step up and share something at which they failed over the course of the week, and what they learned from it. It's often hard at the outset and for new team members to do it, so it's very important as a leader for you to kind of lead by example and start by demonstrating that vulnerability. But it really creates a context in which people feel confident and safe taking big, bold, ambitious risks. And if they fail, we're going to turn it into a learning experience and move on pretty quickly. If you've got a psychologically safe environment, you can build a strong feedback culture. High performers really crave feedback. If they're not getting it, whether it's positive or whether it's constructive, they can just be kind of paralyzed. And so often, and I say especially in today's world, it's challenging to do that if everyone's virtual, not connected and able to look each other in the eye. And so you've got to build that muscle in the organization. And so, often we'll start with something very structured, organized 360 feedback sessions, maybe even using specific formulas for, how to deliver feedback, how to receive feedback. But over time, you're calling it out when you see it and celebrating it to kind of reinforce that that muscle. Then over time, the team and the people build the capacity to do it in real time. And then, you gotta build a sustainable organization. That means kind of respecting people's boundaries, leading by example as well, making sure that people can kind of get some work-life harmony. I don't really believe in this, work-life balance. Like, there's two separate things. I really think at the end of the day, certainly for entrepreneurs, but for most members of a team, they've got to be integrated. And so, like, I'll put my exercise on my shared calendar just so that people can see that's okay in the middle of the day to do some exercise. I'll put a nap on my calendar if that's what I'm doing. Different people have different needs, but as a CEO, you have to demonstrate to them that they're safe or okay. And that's how you build a team that's not burning out, that's passionate and motivated, but actually can keep it going for the long run.
Yeah, I think I could see the eyes of your fellow CEOs here when you mentioned Failure Fridays. It's like, all right, yeah, that's new. Can you go one level deeper on if folks want to learn more about the practicalities of building psychological safety or a feedback culture related, but I suppose different? Where would they go to learn and or measure, I suppose, that at their organization?
Yeah, so for psychological safety, we really we stand on the shoulders of giants. And so we use a lot of work from Amy Edmondson. I think she's at Harvard, who's been a pioneer, certainly in the modern age, of psychological safety. And she has a simple, I think it's 14-question assessment that's used. And we would just send them out as surveys, kind of initially. Sometimes in other contexts, we'd send out like one question, every week or something. In other contexts, we'd send out the entire questionnaire. And I would also sometimes add some other questions about, hey, how are you feeling, on your own personal sustainability or burnout? How are you feeling about the direction the company's going, just to take advantage? People can get kind of burnt out on surveys, but we find something like that is very simple, very easy to use. There's some tools that integrated already, like Culture Amp, for example, has an employee engagement tools that are built on it as well. But when we first started doing that, and I think I first started doing it a few ventures ago, we just built our own Qualtrics survey and sent it out. It's really neat. You can establish a baseline, you do it periodically, you can see how things are trending over time. And whenever you introduce a specific intervention, then you can see what the impact of that intervention is in some kind of soft real time. You can also see how it changes as new people come onto the team or other people leave the team as well. And so it's just a great way to kind of keep your finger on the pulse of how, the foundation on which your organization is, needs to have a strong foundation to take these big, bold, ambitious swings.
Yeah, love it. Okay, so just a kind of a time check, 1:41 Eastern, which means about 4 minutes until we take audience Q&A. So wink, wink, audience, lob those questions in. And for our friendly CEOs here, that means we have time for one quicker answer. Yeah. So call it a minute or so each. Kameale, back to you. So you all have totally punched above your weight in the best way possible to influence national and state policy around EV charger uptime, but it's broader than that. How did you do it, and what does it mean for your business?
Okay, super fast.
Super
I
fast.
strongly believe that if you are in climate, you got to engage in government. Climate tech founders have to figure out how to engage in government. And so we learned that very early on that like without policy supporting our business or even understanding our business, we would not be able to be successful. And so the first hire that I actually did was government relations. Most of my investors thought I was crazy. And then we actually partnered with an association and hired a lobbyist. But we passed a bill called the EV Charging Reliability Act in California last year. Bill got picked up in Maryland as well and is currently on the docket in Michigan. But this bill required there to be funding allocated for O&M. In my company, we fix charging stations, so it's very helpful. But I think really taking a look at what barriers may exist in the policy landscape. Is policy impacting your business in a positive and in a negative way, or can it impact your business in a more positive way? And then working with associations if you don't have budget to hire lobbyists on your own. But that's my minute. I'm done. Okay, there we go.
Super efficient. Super efficient. That's great. Amit, back to you. So you're based in Ohio. I'm guessing that many of the hundreds of listeners today are not based in a Bay Area or Boston or pick your large metro. So pros, cons for building a company of your scale. I think close to 400 people. Tackling energy efficiency in buildings from Ohio versus some more obvious major metro for climate.
Well, it's easy to start a company in a place where that you believe the talent is already there, but I believe the talent is everywhere, and you have to look for that talent. In some way, I thought being in Midwest is an advantage rather than a disadvantage, because you could be a star company in Boston, but there are another 50 star companies, and in Bay Area, there are probably 5,000 star companies, right? So you could be the star company in Dayton area, and then that gives you a real advantage. We have our business all over the country, so this location really gives us an advantage to travel from 3 different airports, Dayton, Cincinnati, Columbus. That's a great advantage. Raising a family and not wasting time traveling and all the big city issues is a big advantage. So there's lots of advantages being not in the hot spot and become yourself a hot spot, right? So that's how I look at it. I mean, we have 100,000 square feet of building space we own, which is very difficult to do that in Bay Area, right? I mean, you have to be a few billion-dollar company to be able to own that much real estate and have your own facilities and your own offices and all that. So lots of advantages of being not in the Bay Area or in Boston or New York.
Well, I think I knew, and many folks listening knew, that you would, of course, make lemon from the supposed, make lemonade from the supposed lemons. Of course, there are advantages, right, to not being in one of those spots. Wonderfully done. By the way, the voice of God and/or Jake Mitchell has spoken to me in the chat and says we can go a touch over 145. All right, we'll go to Bryan, and maybe we'll come back to give Kameale the time she she deserves for another question. So Bryan, we've referenced Third Derivative for folks who don't know. Largest climate tech accelerator, 200 startups, mostly hard tech backed, a couple of $1 billion in follow-on capital they've raised. What are you taking from that at DexMat, or what should folks here who are building hard tech companies, what should they take from lessons learned from Third Derivative's ecosystem?
Yeah, so lightning round, I'll try to be super brief here. If there's one takeaway, I think it's just you've got to dare to be different. There are so many people, investors, advisors, employees, others will try to squeeze you into executing patterns that have been executed over and over again. But those patterns are the ones that got us to where we are with a rapidly, warming environment, et cetera. I mean, VCs, and I love VCs. I love our VCs. I have many friends and colleagues who are VCs, but they will look at you with a straight face and say, "Oh, well, you have to build the company this way because that's what our VC model requires." And then you zoom out and you look at the distribution of VC returns, and they're terrible. Like most of them don't even keep up with the S&P 500. So it's like, why would we do that? And it's not the VC's fault. That's what their LPs are asking them to do. But most businesses and governments aren't meeting their climate goals. And I love this quote from Bill McKibben that winning slowly when it comes to climate is losing too. So like we have to try new things and tread new ground. So like at Third Derivative, we did it by out of the gate building the largest climate tech innovation ecosystem, the largest startup accelerator cohort that had ever been built before. And then we just continue to build on that. And people told us, "Oh no, you can't do that. You have to have a small cohort for this reason or that reason." And we said, well, no, like we need we need more startups. We need them doing faster. We need to mobilize more capital. And so we didn't let ourselves be constrained by the status quo. And I'd say the same at DexMat. We're taking the same mentality, right? People are trying to decarbonize steel. And by the way, there's only so much you can decarbonize a material like steel. And we're like, no, let's go back to first principles and let's not be constrained by that. And we're gonna make steel obsolete by not being constrained by the need for it. And so every climate tech entrepreneur, I think, should be daring to be different, to be thinking outside the box, or at least pausing to ask, wait, what would need to be true for me to do something that's totally different than has been done before?
So it may seem impossible, but it sounds like, Bryan, your parents were the same as Kameale's. Because it's like, let's just obviate steel globally, right? That's our business plan. So yeah, I think love the big thinking. Hell yeah. I'm also reminded. So you mentioned the word daring. So the CEO of TerraSat, so this carbon removal nonprofit that I co-founded, he was responding to my newsletter this morning and saying, "Man, that quote from Helen Keller, which is like something like life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all." He's like, "But that really landed around what we're doing at TerraSat, or what look, thousands of folks here are doing to build their companies as well." Audience questions. Yeah, so Jake, maybe we move now towards audience questions. Got about 6 minutes, I think, till the transition.
Sure thing. Yeah, thank you all for that super inspiring, insightful conversation. I could listen to you for all day. Kameale, this question's for you. So I imagine, a number of founders on the call today are early stage and also in that kind of accelerator mode. You mentioned Elemental, MIT Solve, Lacey. Are you still involved with accelerators? And if not, like, what was the turning point where you're like, okay, I can scale this on my own now?
So now we actually do certain accelerators primarily for utilities. So if utilities are your customers, most utilities have innovation arms. And so I would look up the utilities that you are wanting to do business with, look at their innovation arm, because typically the innovation arm will have some type of accelerator. And you may have like a 5-month program, but at the end of that program, you can actually launch a pilot project. 80% of my customers are utilities, and I would say probably about half of those we gained more commercial grade projects through pilot programs because we were in an accelerator with them. And so the innovation program, and you might even find this for some of the corporates, as well, where they're utilizing these like incubators, accelerators to de-risk the investment of doing work with you. So we do them now, but more strategic to who we want to acquire as a customer. Today, we're not in any general program per se. And that was the transition, is like, once we felt as though we got our bearings of like funding, product market fit, now the programs we're looking for are more so customer acquisition type of programs.
Got it. That's super helpful. Yeah, I know Xylem Innovation Labs, as a part of Xylem, the water equipment manufacturer, has an incubator as well. And I know hopefully a lot more corporates will be taking that.
I can name 3 just real quick, just for
Sure.
help. Yeah. So MasterCard has a really good program. And so even if you somehow are connected to FinTech, Climate Tech, they have a really good program, as well as Dominion Energy, as well as Exelon. And Exelon will do an investment between 50,000 to 100,000. And then Duke also has a program, which I am not remembering the name of it, but if you look up Duke Innovation, you will find it.
Great. Thank you, Kameale. Perfect. I want to do a round robin with all of you too, real quick. Referencing Chris's 9 lessons in the beginning, I'm curious what all of your first thing first is. And maybe that's not in the morning, but just some inspiration around morning routines or routines that keep your energy, and keep your mind clear throughout the day. And maybe Chris, let's start with you.
Well, let's see. This morning it was up at 6. It was an hour of meditation and journaling, and then it was straight into work. However, my next call with one of our CEOs at EFI, it is rucking in the woods with 30 pounds on my back and talking about super hard challenges that CEOs face. And then at night, I usually end with meditation or journaling or reading some sort of like wisdom literature. Yeah.
Love it. Amit, why don't we go to you?
Sure. I'm a guy of routine, right? So I have a very strict routine. Strict is not the right word, but very regular routine. My alarm goes up at 5:15. I get up and learn Norwegian, which is my wife's language, and I've been learning maintain my streaks, spend 20 minutes doing that. And then I get into meditation. I do Vipassana, 45 minutes or so. And then I go for a run. I love my dog, Buttercup, and we go for, my goal is to do 2 miles, sometimes depending on the time, if I'm doing, 1 mile, 1.5 miles. Sometimes I just go even out back to Atomic Habit, right? Go out around the corner and back, but I want to put on my shoes and get out and keep that, thing running. Some workout, body weight stuff, and then rush to work. My kids are grown up. Otherwise, there was a routine. I would make breakfast for them every morning. And then I used to make lunch for myself every morning. And before I go to work, I eat the same thing every day. So I have the same salad every day. So there's no variation in that. Cold shower in the morning. So that's part of the routine. And that's it.
Well, the most important thing you said was that your dog's name was Buttercup.
That was my key takeaway also. Buttercup must love those runs in the morning. Kameale, how about you?
Yeah, I am a 4:35 a.m. person. So I'm 5-minute meditation, 10% Happier, which is a great meditation app. I'm 5-minute yoga. I forget my yoga instructor's lady's name, but she's on YouTube. She's great. And then I do 3 things of gratitude from the previous day. I have my little journal. I've been doing this since I started the company. So I have books and books now of gratitude. And you'll be surprised the things you can be grateful for, even if you had a previous really bad day. And then I'm reading my 1 page of some type of book that's, I guess, wisdom-based. I never heard of that category, Chris, but yes, wisdom-based literature.
Love it. And Bryan.
Yeah, so my alarm is my 6-year-old, and it's earlier and earlier all the time, it seems. But it's great because we get to spend some quality time together in the morning before getting hustle off to school or what have you. Then I found about myself, I'm a moving meditator. Like, I love to meditate, but I do it best when I'm kind of in motion. So yoga is great, along like a trail run. I'm in Colorado, so great opportunities for trail runs. or if I've taken my kid to school by bike, then going for a nice bike ride afterward. And that's really how I kind of center myself, clear my mind before the day, but not intentionally. It just kind of happens organically. And I just find when I don't do those things, I'm not my best self with my colleagues, with my partner, with my kids, etc. And so I really have to prioritize the first things first.
Thank you all for sharing. I think it's so important to hear from CEOs that you are taking the time you need for yourself. It's not just or working on your business from when you wake up until you fall asleep. You really need to take care of yourself to achieve your mission. So thank you so much for sharing. And we have a couple minutes left, and I want to steal a question from Tim Ferriss, big fan of his podcast over the years, and adapt it a little bit. So for all four of you, if you could put one message on a billboard, and in this case, to get through to all the climate tech entrepreneurs in the world, what would that message be? And I will stall a little bit so you have a couple seconds to think.
I was like, oh, I know. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, okay, sweet.
Well, I love that you picked Tim's question. I think for an entrepreneurial audience, something like entrepreneurship is not risky, which most folks assume it's risky. But I just think about all the folks who are employees, W-2 employees, some change in the business and they're gone, like single point of failure. Anyway, I think having more control of your fate, having multiple customers, therefore, one can't end you, if you will. Anywho, Kameale, I'm excited to hear yours.
Yeah, specifically for like climate tech entrepreneurs, it would be build something beautiful.
I love it. Bryan.
You are not alone.
It's
going to take a village to build a sustainable, prosperous, equitable future. And I think often it can seem scary, especially the big, bold, ambitious missions. And but we're all in this together, and we got you.
I love it. I love it. And Amit, last but not least.
My message to people who are really trying to make a difference is the few will make the difference in the world and it's only the few who move the world forward, and we can be, and you can be one of those few.
I love it. Well, thank you all so much for sharing, your lessons learned. Chris, thanks for organizing this incredible group of entrepreneurs. And thank you all for tuning in today. I'm going to close this out with just a couple of reminders. We'll be sending a recording of this conversation in the next 24 hours, so be on the lookout for that. We have more Climate Tech Connect content coming for you this year, so stay tuned in the platform. You'll see it on the events tab. If you're in the Bay Area, or if you're not in the Bay Area and you're a startup, you might be eligible for a 40% discount to Verge 24. That's Trellis Group's climate tech event. We're expecting 6,000 professionals this year advancing climate tech. Verge is in San Jose, California, October 29th through 31st. So go ahead and check that out. And then if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, reach out to me, startups@trellis.net. Would love to hear from you. Any content you'd like to see more of, or any thoughts about the content you've seen so far. So thank you again to our amazing panelists. Thank you, Chris. And have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Jake.
Good work, folks.
Thanks. Bye.